Good afternoon. I am Judge Deborah Thomas, and I want to thank you for tuning in today. I have a wonderful guest who we're going to talk about some dynamics of things that are going on in this area, and I think you will enjoy meeting him if you haven't before, and many of you have heard of him before. My guest today is attorney Godfrey Dillard. How you doing?
Hey, good morning, Judge. Good to see you.
You
I'm looking
too.
forward to it.
Now, some of the folks, they said, Godfrey Dillard, I know I've heard that name before. You ran statewide a couple of years ago, and you were running for Secretary of State, wasn't it?
That's correct. During the 2014, along with you, and you
Yeah.
was running for Supreme Court. I was the Democratic nominee for Secretary of State. We almost won that race too.
We worked hard at it.
If we could get a few more people out to vote, get our folks out here to vote, it would have made a difference, I think.
Now, you have been attorney for how long?
I'm scared to say 45 years.
Ain't you? A little bit ahead of me. And even if you wasn't, I was going to say you were. And what type of practice have you done over the 45
well,
years?
Judge Thomas, I've done a lot of different things. I've had a criminal practice, I've had a civil practice. I have an international law practice. I have a background in international law. I was a diplomat for a while.
What kind of diplomat?
I was a United States diplomat. I served in Africa, the Belgian Congo. I was in the Congo, Zaire during the Mobutu period. I was there for approximately 2 years. And so I had a chance. I speak French. I've done a lot of community work, a lot of pro bono work. Of course, I did the University of Michigan affirmative action case that went to the Supreme Court back a few years ago. Been involved with, the Wayne County debt problems. Was involved and represented the Third Circuit. Represented the Third Circuit in a key case, and so I've had a broad and expansive career. I'm very pleased with what I've done over the years, but I got one more job I want to get.
All right. Now, you've been recognized across the country,
Correct.
haven't you?
Yes, I have.
What type of honors? Let the folks know that you have received in terms of your work across the country.
Well, the most recent one, I was one of the first black athletes in the Southeastern Conference. And of course, the Southeastern Conference that was Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, Florida, Tennessee, Kentucky. I helped integrate that conference back in the '60s. I went to Vanderbilt University. It was only 8 blacks on the campus at that time. So the SEC back about a month ago awarded me the Michael Slive Distinguished Service Award, which is the highest award that the Southeastern Conference gives to someone for service to the conference. And of course, I was the one helped integrate that conference. First black to play against a white boy in Mississippi,
Ooh.
Starkville, Mississippi. I'll never forget it. And of course, I've been honored by the Wolverine Bar Association. I've been honored by the National Bar Association. There's so many things I can't even recall. When I get awards, I kind of push them to the back.
All right, and keep working.
I'm keep working. I'm a future
I
guy.
understand. I understand. Now, you're a Detroit resident?
Born and raised in Detroit. My dad was one of the original 100 Tuskegee Airmen, the original 100. And of course, a lot of them were discharged at Selfridge Air Force Base, so that's why we have such a large group of them. Unfortunately, my dad died at the young age of 36. I was raised by my mother and grandmother, 5 kids. I went to a small Catholic school on the west side of Detroit. Presently, I've always lived in Detroit. Of course, I've lived in D.C., I've lived in Atlanta, I've lived in different
You lived
places.
in Africa.
Yeah, lived in Africa. And, I'm licensed in Georgia. I've spent some work in D.C. But, I've always maintained a residence in Detroit, and I live in the downtown area. I love Detroit, and so I'm very much interested at this stage of my career is making one more run for this office where I really think I can make a difference for the citizens, particularly the 13th District.
All right. Why did you run for Secretary of State? Let's start there.
Mm-hmm.
And you keep saying that there's another run you want to make. All right? I mean, you've done such fantastic work in our community. You've done good work across the country. You've done good work across the world. You got something else you want to do?
Well, then let me talk about the Secretary of State. At that time, it was about voting. You know, the Secretary of State in Michigan has the principal function of regulating voting. And of course, you know, we've had a lot of voter suppression. So my interest in the Secretary of State's race in 2014 was try to improve the quality of voting in Detroit and throughout the state. Right now, I'm going to run for the congressional seat in the 13th district, the seat that John Conyers just resigned from. I'm running for that particular seat because, you know, I think the 13th district has some really serious problems, starting with a 28% unemployment rate. I want to try to do some things to improve the quality of life for the residents of the 13th district. I know there's a lot of concern about a lot of people running for office,
Yeah,
but,
I was
you know,
gonna ask you that now. You know, just from what I hear, you know, folks kind of talk to me in certain neighborhood groups and organizations, and there's been an expression of concern that there are going to be so many people running from Detroit that they're going to split that vote, and that because redrawing the lines, there is no district that just represents Detroit anymore.
correct.
All right, and so there's concern that all these folks running from Detroit going to split the vote. There's going to be somebody elected from the suburbs, and for the first time in over at least 70, 75 years, there's not going to be a congressional representative who actually lives in the city. Now, how do you respond to that?
Well, Deborah, that's one of the reasons why I'm running for office. You know, my feeling is that if the 13th can have a quality candidate, a person who's competent, a person who's experienced, who has all the tools, the education, the community involvement, if that type of person stepped up in this, what you call this mass of people thinking about running for this office that hasn't been open for 50 years, it's my hope, and it's not only my hope, it's my belief that the leadership, the African American leadership, the general leadership in Detroit will focus in on the candidate who has the best qualifications, the competencies, and experience. And as they say, you know, the cream rises to the top, okay? And so my feeling is this is one of the reasons why I'm getting in this race, because I don't think there's anybody in this race like Godfrey Dillard. There's nobody in the 13th district like Godfrey Dillard with the background that we just talked about. And given this historic time we are, and in the trouble that we're dealing on this national level with Trump, we've got to have a person that can come into Washington, D.C. on the ground running. I've lived in Washington, D.C. You know, I work for the federal government. I was a member of the United States State Department. I know how it works. And so that's what I'm saying is I believe my candidacy is going to rise above that, and I'm going to be the one that's chosen.
All right.
Because I believe I'm the best one for the job.
Now, one of my concerns, because I established the Veterans Treatment Court for Wayne County, I've gone across the state advocating for veterans and veteran treatment courts, and this election year, there are actually there's not going to be, there are 3 congressional seats that are up for election just in the Tri-County, Wayne County, Oakland County area. And it's only Congress that can allocate funding, write regulations that address the needs of veterans. So, you know, you folks say you should not be a one-issue person, but when it comes to these congressional seats, my question is veterans.
Right.
What do you know about where they are? What do you know about what they need? And what do you think in Congress can be done to improve the services for veterans?
Well, you know, I when I did my work for the State Department back in the 70s, you know, I actually worked in a war zone. So, you know, I actually have had an opportunity to kind of get a feeling for that. I guess my concern for veterans is veterans as a result of combat have come back, and there's some particular areas that have really affected them. One of them is their suicide rate. You know, their suicide rate is like 20%, well above the national average. I saw a study once that said 22 veterans die every day from suicide. The other area that they have issues, I think, serious is homelessness.
Yeah.
Something like 10% of all the homeless people are veterans. And you know, we've got, you know, the post traumatic
stress.
And so I guess And we have a conservative government, and I think this is an area where we can work with Republicans. They're pro defense. They want to allocate more money to defense spending, but what I would be
That's on the
advocating,
fighting side. What about the poor
and
folks that did the fighting?
and that's what I'm saying. I say what we have to have as an advocate is to move some of that funds from the fighting side to deal with these issues that we just talked about. 22 veterans dying every day from suicide. These are serious issues.
I
So one
saw
of the
a
things I want to
report
do.
that says that we have over 55,000 homeless women veterans.
Absolutely.
That's just the women. They're not even counting the men.
Right, right.
And then in working through the Veterans Treatment Court, I've come to discover that the Vietnam era veterans are not being provided services that they
Yeah.
were promised when they were drafted,
Absolutely, right,
and that they are now competing with our Iraqi
right,
veterans.
right.
And, and it impacts family members
Right,
as well.
right.
And so, with regards to this election, I'm hoping that people are going to make veteran services, veterans benefit a primary issue.
Right, and you like you say, where your Vietnam, World War II, you seem to be forgotten, but a lot of these folks are dealing with loneliness, homelessness. But I particularly like what you're doing because that's a local effort that we need to do. Because we have homelessness, because they have a lot of mental illness and these issues and addiction, they get run afoul of the criminal justice system. And I think what you're doing is we have to say to the criminal justice, we have to treat these folks a little bit differently. We're not saying we're going to give them a pass. But the fact that if they can show some association with some of their service, we've got to find a way to help them enter back into the system such that they're not, just destroyed.
Restorative justice.
I part of what you're doing is exactly what needs to be done on the local level, is to get the court system, get the legislature to change the laws maybe a little bit, to give you a little bit more power.
Something else to work with.
Yeah, we have to work with, but if we can win this governorship, we can try to convince these people to give programs like yours a little bit more money and a little more power to help these people transition back into normal society.
Now, my guest today is Attorney Godfrey Dillard, and if you got started with us at the top of the show, then you know that he has been active in this community, around the nation, around the world, and with issues of civil rights and what have you. If you have a question, the number is on the screen. You can give us a call. I guess, why Congress? Why go all the way to Washington to become, one of several hundred? Can't get anything done on your own. Got to get some other folks to agree with you. And if you're in the minority, to me that sounds awfully frustrating.
Well, as they say, all politics is local, Judge Thomas. And I think what I want to do by holding the congressional seat in the 13th district, that's going to give me a lot of ability to do things locally. I mean, it's not just a question of what I do in Washington, but it'll give me a chance to use my influence as a congressperson to push for certain changes here in the legislature, to interact with the governor, interact with the mayor, interact with all the mayors of the 13th district, whether it's Westland or River Rouge or Ecorse or Hamtramck or Highland Park. I can come in there and use my office to assist them in the programs that we're doing. So being a congressman is not just all about Washington, D.C. Local, all politics is local, so using that influence is important to me, and I think it's one of the reasons why I want to run. And I also think at the national level, if a qualified person comes into that position, I do believe that the leadership of the Democratic Party will look at a junior representative, and if they have the credentials and the background to make a difference immediately, they're going to move them up quick. In other words, I think a person like myself coming in with my constitutional law background, my international background, my criminal law background, my foreign service background, with the education, University of Michigan Law School, Vanderbilt University, Eastern Michigan, George Washington University, Columbia, they're not just going to put me in the back room.
Okay.
And so what I'm saying is I think this is important that the 13th district elect a person that can come in and make a difference for them right away. And to me, competency, experience, and education background are critical to getting things done, as you know.
Now, this is not even the first time you ran for Congress.
Yeah, I ran for Congress 20 years ago, but I was at that time. I thought I was the right person at the time, but I've learned over the years that you got to do the right kind of groundwork, within the political system to make a difference. Unless you come in and you're a millionaire, you just pay your way,
Right.
which I wasn't at that time. But I do feel that I've done the groundwork in the Democratic Party. I do believe that the leadership is aware of me. They know what I'm capable of doing. I've ran that statewide election for Secretary of State, and everyone said I did a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Almost won it, and wasn't in it that long. So, but this is the job I've always kind of coveted for a long time because I thought it was the perfect match for me, and I thought that was
How
the
are
best
you
one.
reaching out outside of the boundaries of the city of Detroit? I've run statewide too, but my position is countywide, and so I think it's important. I know when I was first elected, when you look, my votes have been down through the years, just evenly split between those in the city and those in the suburb. And like I tell folks, we all in this boat together.
Right.
All
Right.
right, we
Right.
either gonna all rise together or we're gonna all fall together.
Right.
So how do you view the role in terms of uniting all of the communities in the district and work in helping us to get to know each other better and work together better?
Right. Well, one of what I intend to do is I intend to go into the non-Detroit communities that are in the 13th district. The Hamtramcks, Highland Park, the Westlands, the River Rouges, the East Courses. My intention is to go down there and meet the elected officials of each of those districts, and I have met them before because as a Secretary of State candidate, I had a chance to go into these communities, and all of these communities, for the most part, I think when you look downriver, are suffering from unemployment. They got a high unemployment rate. We get a lot of talk about rebuilding Detroit, but you also got to rebuild the surrounding areas of Detroit because they become feeders for Detroit. You got a lot of people who work in Detroit but don't live in Detroit. Right. So we have to do that. But my strategy is to go down into these districts, meet the local officials, meet the people down there, and try to convince them that I am the right guy for this job and that I have the potential to deliver the best that they can get in the particular environment that we're in. I'm not claiming to be Superman. I'm not going to be able to do everything. But I do believe that I have the skill set and the tools that I can convince them that I'm the right person.
All right, all right. Our phone number is listed. I don't know if you're so busy listening, so you haven't formulated a question. But if you do have a question for Attorney Dillard, our number today, please call us at 365-7379. This may be your only chance. I hope not to ask him a question directly. And going into Washington, there's all these committees
Right.
that you can sit on.
Right.
Which ones would you be eyeing?
Well, I like to get at Ways and Means.
And for those who don't know, why would you want Ways and Means?
Ways and Means is the committee that deals with doling out the federal money. They're the ones to decide where the money goes.
Okay.
The ways and means by which that money is transferred from the federal government to the local community. So I would love to get on the ways and means. I certainly would like to look at the banking committee. Is another committee that I would like.
Okay.
Take that call.
Hello, caller.
Praise the Lord, hello.
Hi. Can you have a question for us today? And I'll repeat it because I'm not hearing it come over the system.
Thank you. I'm calling. I'm a retired U.S. congressional liaison from Washington with the White House. I've been trying to reach this gentleman for some time because I feel as though we should have someone in that seat right now. And I've left messages. I had to call Tom Perez in Washington as well as the deputy chair of the National Democratic Party, Keith Ellison.
Okay.
And I'm wondering why it takes so long. You're overly qualified. I'm telling you, yes, you're qualified. You want to be on the Ways and Means Committee, but the first committee they're going to put you on is Judiciary.
All right.
And I hope you'll be able to be on two committees.
Well, you know, I think everybody, you know, following in John Conyers' footsteps and continuing the tradition of John Conyers, I think everybody thinks I want to be on the Judiciary Committee.
No, it's the assignment of the chair of the Republican Party. They decide what committee you go on.
Yeah, I understand.
I'm going to let him answer because I've got.
Yeah.
You brought up something I want
Yeah.
to go into a little bit more myself. So thank you.
I'm not opposed to the Judiciary Committee, but I guess, Judge Thomas, what I'm trying to look at, you know, I want to look at the economic side. I want to look at the ways in which we haven't had a congressperson. You know, the 13th district has some major economic issues, and so I want to serve the 13th district. I want to try to improve the quality of life for the 13th district, and I think if I could get in one of those economic positions where we can direct some funds to the 13th district to fund some of the things we want to do, like you said, veterans, you know.
Yeah.
If I'm on Ways and Means,
How about public transportation?
Infrastructure, there's a lot of things. So although I'm, a lawyer, I've also has economic experience. I was economic counselor in the Belgian Congo as part of one of my services, and I've had training in international economics. So all I'm saying is, I'm looking to
where
do
the money is.
Yeah, right.
She did bring up an important point. We won't have anyone serving in that seat all this year.
Right. Well, we got to remember that the Constitution passed voting and the handling of voting to the states. And the state statute, which is clear, I've taken a look at it, clearly gives the governor the ability to establish when the election would be. And I gather from what I've heard is he spoke with stakeholders, and they made the decision that it'd be best that it be held in the primary, and that there would be, I guess, these 8 months here of non-representation. I certainly understand the community's upset over the fact of non-representation for 8 or 9 months. But the reality of the matter is the states. So they're going to be
electing somebody in August who will serve until the end of the year, and then elect somebody in November?
No.
What's happening?
No. What we're talking about is the congressperson who will take office probably immediately after the November election. I believe that's what's going to happen. If not, it's going to be January.
So then we won't have representation in the 13th
for a whole year.
For a whole year.
And that's true. But the state statute gave the governor right, and the governor met with the appropriate people, and this is what they wanted. I don't think it's right now. I don't think it's right, but
Hello.
Do you have a question for us?
Yes, I wanted to ask Brother Dillard. Was he the same Godfrey Dillard that worked for the Youth Entitlement Program back in the 80s?
The Youth Entitlement Program? No.
There's more than one Godfrey Dillard out there?
I'd be surprised. I haven't met him in Detroit. Let me be clear. As I said, I've had a long career of 45 years. I've worked in a lot of community programs. I may have just forgotten it. You're going back to 1980. Was that 30 years ago? So I may not be remembering that.
Have you worked with our young people in education? I'm a former teacher.
Right.
All right. What can they do in Congress in terms of education? Student loan debt.
Right.
All right. I mean, our children come out of school and they owe so much student loan debt they could have bought a house.
Well, I think that's one of the key issues that we're going to face in the next congressional cycle is student debt. I think where they've lowered the tax rates for corporations 40%. Can you imagine that? The corporate rate has been lowered 40%. And so I think then now we'll have the kind of support that we can turn to student loan debt. We need to do more funding for education, but I think we got to have a little bit more accountability in education. I think, some of these programs that we've had, although they have good intentions, they haven't delivered. and we can't keep allowing dollars to flow into things that are not necessarily delivering. One of the problems I have with charter schools, I found that a lot of the organizations or the educational institutions that were funding them or sponsoring them were outside of the city of Detroit, and the tax dollars go outside the city of Detroit up to Lansing or the western part of the state, wherever these universities are located, and they put it in their banks in Lansing, they put it in their banks in Grand Rapids and the like, and then when they hire contractors, vendors and the like, they hire their vendors and contractors, and they don't necessarily service the are required to hire local Detroit vendors. So I think in education, we need more dollars. We need a little bit more oversight because ultimately we've got to improve public education. I mean, we have to. I mean, that's the only way that we're going to continue the progress that we've made over the last 300-400 years.
All right, we've got about a couple minutes before we're going to have to wrap up, and I'm going to have other folks on who say they want this position too. So I think if we're going to close out, we ought to close out by you telling folks why you think it ought to be you, and what experience that you are to bring that's unique, because before it's all over said and done, there's going to be a lot of comparisons that have to be made.
Well, I don't think it will be anybody in this race that has the background, the competency, the experience, the exposure of Godfrey Dillard. I think that given this current federal situation with Trump, we're going to have people who can come in on the ground running. We can't have, just because your name is this, or just because you happen to be 20 years old and you're worrying about whether or not you can't do anything until you've been in Congress 20 years. The future is now. We can't worry about the future. The future is now. We need someone to come in for the 13th with all the problems that the 13th have: unemployment, the educational system, the deteriorating infrastructure. We need to have somebody that can come in and attempt to deliver some goods and services to them. And once again, I also want to close that, as a congressperson, I'm going to be local. I believe that all politics is local. I'm going to use my congressional seat to help the local mayors of the Westlands, the River Rouges, the Highland Park. I'm going to help the city councils, to help the educational systems to have a voice, not only in local politics, but also in national politics.
And I guess I should ask you, since one of our callers did mention, how folks find you if they want to. You got a website, a email, a phone number, anything?
Yes, my website should be up this coming week. You can reach me at GodfreyDillard.com. There's a Facebook name, GodfreyDillard.com.
And how you spell that?
That's GODFREY. DILLARD. I'll repeat it. GODFREYDILLARD. I always used to tease my mother, Mom, why did you name me Godfrey, this long name that nobody could ever repeat? And of course, my cousin was named Godfrey, so there's several Godfreys in my house. I used to always be embarrassed by it, because when I used to be a basketball player, I go to the free throw line and shoot the free throw. The crowd used to go, Godfrey. It's just so embarrassing. But no.
But it's unique.
Yeah, it's unique.
It's unique.
I hear. So, but
I want to thank Attorney Godfrey Dillard for coming in today. I will be having other folks on, but I want folks to know what's available.
Right.
And exercise their vote. I want to thank my audience for tuning in today. I am going to be holding expungement forums starting by the end of the February. I've got one planned. I've got a firearm safety forum that I'm going to be doing in February. I'm going to get the dates, the times, and the locations to you. I'm hoping you'll turn up and turn out. And as always, I want you to know that I love you, Detroit.